Watch before delete. I came inside my alien maid from behind. Lura arrived on Earth without ceremony. Her transport ship was small, silent, and gray, landing behind the tall white walls of the Galactic Union Embassy in New Geneva City. No cameras flashed. No crowds gathered. To the galaxy, she was unimportant. To the Union, she was just another service worker assigned to a minor world. Lura was a maid. She was shorter than most humans, with smooth pale blue skin and large dark eyes that reflected light like polished stone. She wore a simple uniform and carried a small cleaning device that floated beside her. Her job was clear: clean halls, maintain rooms, and stay invisible. That suited her well. Earth was new to the Galactic Union. Humans had only reached space a few decades ago, and their technology was considered rough and outdated. The Union called Earth a protected developing world, but the word protected felt heavy, like a cage made of kind words. Lura noticed this on her first day. As she cleaned the main conference hall, human diplomats sat at the far end of the table, while alien officials took the best seats. The humans spoke carefully, choosing each word with effort. The aliens listened politely but rarely agreed. Lura did not judge quickly. She watched. She watched how the humans stayed calm even when ignored. She watched how they kept working late, long after meetings ended. She watched them help each other quietly, sharing food, advice, and tired smiles. Lura cleaned the floors beneath their feet, but her mind was always active. She had been trained to observe. Her species, the Velathi, had survived only because they learned early, watched closely, and remembered everything. Long ago, the Velathi had trusted powerful allies. Long ago, they had believed promises. They paid for that mistake. Now only a few Velathi remained, scattered across the galaxy, serving in quiet roles. The Union called them harmless. Lura knew better. Each morning, Lura began her work before sunrise. She moved through empty halls, polishing glass walls that looked out over the city. Earth cities were loud, crowded, and messy, but alive. Vehicles moved in endless streams. Lights stayed on all night. Humans refused to rest. She found that strange. On her homeworld before its fall, life had been slow and careful. Energy was saved. Risks were avoided. When danger came, it was already too late. Humans were different. They argued loudly, made mistakes, and pushed limits they barely understood. But they never stopped trying. Even when treated as small, they stood straight. One morning, as Lura cleaned a research wing, she noticed a human technician struggling with a broken console. The man was young, with dark hair and tired eyes. He tapped the screen again and sighed. "Come on," he muttered. "Just work." Lura paused. She was not required to help. It was not her role, but she adjusted a small control on the console as she passed. The screen lit up. The technician stared. "Oh, thanks," he said, surprised. Lura nodded politely and continued walking. That single word, thanks, echoed in her mind longer than it should have. Not all aliens spoke kindly to her. Some ignored her completely. Others spoke sharply as if she were part of the furniture. But humans almost always acknowledged her. A nod, a smile, a greeting, small things. Powerful things. Days turned into weeks. Lura learned Earth's patterns. She learned when meetings were real and when they were just for show. She learned which Union officials spoke honestly and which hid behind perfect words. She learned which doors were guarded and which secrets were left carelessly unprotected. She also learned that Earth was being watched closely, too closely. Late one night, while cleaning an empty office, Lura's cleaning device picked up an unusual energy pattern from a secure terminal. It was not meant for her, but Velathi's senses were sharp, trained to notice what others missed. She did not access the data, not yet. Instead, she memorized the terminal's location and security rhythm. She cleaned quietly and left no sign she had noticed anything. But that night, as she returned to her small sleeping room, Lura felt something she had not felt in many years: unease. The next day, the Union announced new evaluation protocols for Earth. More inspections, more data collection, more restrictions. The human response was calm, but Lura noticed their shoulders stiffen. She watched a human scientist argue politely for local control of energy systems. The request was denied. She watched a human engineer propose a shared defense project. The idea was delayed. Lura had seen this pattern before. Her people had seen it too, right before they were declared unnecessary. That evening, as Lura cleaned the high-level archives, she heard voices beyond a sealed wall. The sound filters failed for a moment, just long enough. "Resource inefficient," one voice said. "Planetary risk," said another. "Removal without conflict." Lura froze. Her cleaning device hovered silently beside her. Her heart beat fast, but her face remained calm. The voices faded as the filters restored. She finished her task slowly, carefully, as if nothing had happened. But inside, something had changed. That night, Lura accessed the secure terminal. She knew it was forbidden. She knew the consequences. But Velathi history had taught her one truth above all others. Silence could be deadly. The files were worse than she feared. Earth was not being protected. It was being measured, tested, prepared. The Galactic Union had marked Earth as a future problem, too unpredictable, too emotional, too fast to adapt. A controlled incident was planned decades ahead. An accident, a disaster, something no one could trace. Humanity would vanish quietly. Lura closed the files and sat still for a long time. She thought of the humans she had watched every day. The tired technician. The diplomats who never gave up. The people who smiled at a maid they did not have to notice. Her species had once been strong. They had once believed rules would protect them. Humans did not believe that. They fought anyway. When morning came, Lura returned to her work as usual. She cleaned floors. She polished windows. She bowed her head and stayed silent. But now every step had purpose. She began to watch specific humans more closely. She noted who asked questions, who worked late, who still believed Earth could choose its own future. Among them was the young technician from before, Evan Carter. Lura did not speak to him. Not yet. For now, she was still just a maid. But deep inside, a decision was forming, slow, careful, and unstoppable. Humanity was in danger, and the smallest person in the room might be the only one willing to act. Lura continued her work as if nothing had changed. Every morning, she cleaned the embassy halls, wiped the smooth metal walls, and emptied waste units with calm precision. To everyone watching, she was the same quiet alien maid she had always been. But inside her mind, everything was different now. She knew the truth. Earth was not safe. The Galactic Union did not rush its decisions. It planned slowly, carefully, and without emotion. That was what made it dangerous. Lura understood this better than most. Her people had been erased not by sudden war, but by long plans hidden behind polite words. Now Earth stood at the same edge. Lura began listening more closely. As a maid, she was invisible. Officials spoke freely around her, assuming she did not understand complex language or political meaning. That mistake gave her access to things even trained spies could not hear. In conference rooms, union leaders discussed efficiency. In private offices, they talked about long-term stability. In secure halls, they whispered about acceptable loss. Humans were never mentioned by name. They were called variables. One afternoon, while cleaning a strategy room, Lura heard two union analysts speaking quietly near a holographic display. "Human innovation rate is unstable," one said. "Yes," the other replied. "They adapt too quickly when pressured." That night she returned to the secure terminal. This time she went deeper. She found reports detailing possible future scenarios for Earth: economic collapse, environmental failure, orbital accidents. Each plan was written in neutral language, as if describing weather patterns instead of billions of lives. Lura studied every word. She did not download anything. She memorized it all. Velathi minds were trained for this. When survival depended on memory, forgetting was not an option. As days passed, Lura noticed changes in the embassy. New surveillance drones appeared. Human access to certain areas was restricted. Inspection teams arrived without notice. Humans noticed too. Evan Carter, the young technician, worked longer hours than before. Lura often saw him rubbing his eyes while reviewing data logs. Once, she overheard him speaking quietly to another engineer. "They're blocking system access again," Evan said. "That's the third time this week," the other replied. "Feels like they don't trust us at all." "They never did," Evan said. Lura felt a strange tightening in her chest. Humans could sense danger even without proof. They were not blind, just outmatched. One evening, as Lura cleaned a storage room near the research wing, she noticed Evan sitting alone, staring at a dark screen. His shoulders were tense. He looked tired but not defeated. Lura paused. Helping him openly would draw attention. That was too risky. Instead, she waited until he left, then quietly adjusted the system relay he had been struggling with earlier. She left a diagnostic file open, one that pointed to restricted data access. It was subtle, a question, not an answer. The next day, Evan noticed. Lura watched from across the room as he frowned at the screen, then leaned closer. His eyes widened slightly. He looked around, confused, then thoughtful. He did not report it. That was important. From then on, Lura began guiding small changes. A delay here. An unlocked file there. A warning hidden in maintenance notes. She never used direct language. She let humans connect the dots themselves, because humans trusted their own conclusions more than any warning. Meanwhile, Union officials grew impatient. Lura overheard a high-ranking delegate speaking sharply in a private corridor. "The humans are stalling," the delegate said. "They ask too many questions." Acceleration may be required. Acceleration. Lura knew what that word meant. The timeline was shortening. That night, Lura dreamed of her homeworld. She saw blue skies turning dark, cities empty, voices fading into silence. She woke before rest cycle ended, her heart racing. She could not let that happen again. The next day, an unexpected event occurred. A small power failure shut down part of the embassy for several minutes. Lights flickered. Security systems reset. Officials complained loudly. For Lura, it was opportunity. She moved quickly, entering a restricted data hub she had memorized weeks ago. Her fingers moved with practiced speed, pulling fragments of information, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to confirm her fears. The controlled incident planned for Earth was no longer theoretical. It had a date window, decades away, but moving closer. Lura erased all traces of her access and returned to her duties before power fully restored. But now, knowing was no longer enough. She needed to choose who to trust. She studied humans carefully. Many were kind, many were brave, but helping the wrong person could destroy everything. Evan Carter stood out. He questioned orders but followed rules. He cared about systems but also about people. Most importantly, he noticed details others missed. That made him dangerous and useful. Late one night, Lura placed a small maintenance request on Evan's task list. It led him to an unused corridor near the secure archives. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough. Evan arrived, scanned the area, and frowned. "This makes no sense," he muttered. As he worked, a hidden file appeared on his screen just for a moment. A phrase repeated 3 times before vanishing. "Observation is not protection." Evan froze. He looked around sharply, then checked system logs. Nothing unusual appeared. No record of the message. But he remembered it. The next day, Evan skipped his usual break. He reviewed archived reports, compared access patterns, and quietly copied notes by hand. He did not tell anyone. Lura watched him from a distance. He was learning. Union officials noticed his behavior too. One of them glanced at him with suspicion during a routine inspection. Lura knew time was running out. She faced a choice her people had once failed to make. remain silent and survive alone, or speak and risk everything. That evening, Lura stood before the reflective glass wall overlooking Earth's city lights. Millions of lives moved below, unaware of the plans above them. Humans laughed, argued, built, dreamed. They deserved more than a quiet ending. When Lura turned away from the glass, her decision was clear. She would not wait for permission. She would not wait for the perfect moment. She would act. The alien maid returned to her small room and prepared for the most dangerous task of her life. Not cleaning, not listening, but choosing a side. And for the first time since her world had fallen, Lura felt something close to hope. Lura did not rush. That was the first lesson her people learned after losing their world. Panic made mistakes. Silence, when used carefully, could become a weapon. For several days, she acted normal. She cleaned offices, refilled water units, and nodded politely when spoken to. But her attention stayed fixed on Evan Carter. He had changed. Evan no longer complained openly. He spoke less, watched more. When others left a room, he stayed behind, reviewing data again and again. He started keeping notes on paper instead of digital files. Lura saw the signs clearly. He suspected something was wrong. That made him ready. The moment came late one evening during a scheduled system check. The embassy was quiet. Most officials had left for their rest cycles. Only maintenance staff and a few security officers remained. Lura timed her movements carefully. She entered the server wing with her cleaning device humming softly. Evan was already there, kneeling beside an open panel, tools spread neatly beside him. He looked up when he sensed someone behind him. "Oh, hey," he said, surprised. "Didn't know cleaning was scheduled here tonight." "It was added," Lura replied calmly. Her voice was soft but clear. Evan hesitated. He studied her for a second longer than usual. "Right, sure." She began wiping the far wall, giving him space. For several minutes, neither spoke. The quiet stretched, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then Evan broke it. "You ever notice," he said casually, "how some systems here fail in very specific ways?" Lura did not look at him. "Systems fail in many ways." "Yeah," Evan said slowly. "But these failures feel guided, like someone wants certain people to see certain things." Lura paused her cleaning. She turned to face him. "Humans are observant," she said. Evan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You understand more than most aliens I've met." "I observe," Lura replied. "It is my role." He stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Then maybe you observed this too." He lowered his voice. "Something is wrong with how the Union treats Earth." Lura's heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. "Yes," she said. Evan froze. That single word landed heavier than any warning message. "Yes," he repeated. "You agree?" Lura stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Not here." She glanced at the ceiling cameras. "Follow me," she said. Evan hesitated only a moment before nodding. They moved through a service corridor rarely used at night. Lura unlocked a small maintenance room and sealed the door behind them. The walls were thick. The signal dampeners were old but effective. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lura spoke without masks. "Evan Carter," she said, "what I tell you now will place you in danger." He swallowed. "I already feel like I'm in danger." Lura met his eyes. "Then listen carefully." She explained everything. Not all details, not yet, but enough. She told him about the evaluations, about Earth being marked as unstable, about plans written decades ahead, about disasters designed to look natural. Evan's face grew pale. That's not possible," he said quietly. "They wouldn't do that, not openly." "They will not do it openly," Lura replied. "That is why it works." He paced the small room, running a hand through his hair. "You're saying they plan to erase us?" "Yes." "Why tell me?" he asked sharply. "Why not our leaders?" "Because leaders are watched," Lura said, "and because you listen." Evan stopped pacing. "Why help us at all?" Lura was silent for a long moment. "My people trusted words," she said at last. "We waited, we complied, we believed rules would protect us." She looked down at her hands. "We were wrong." Evan understood without needing more. "So you're risking everything," he said. "Your job, your life." "Yes." "Why?" he asked again, softer this time. Lura looked at him. "Because humans do not wait quietly." That answer stayed with him. From that night on they worked together, but never openly. Evan continued his normal duties. Lura continued cleaning, but small exchanges happened in safe places, short phrases, symbols, shared looks that carried meaning. Lura guided Evan toward evidence without handing it to him directly. She taught him how to see patterns, how to recognize Union language that hid dangerous intent. Evan shared what he found with a few trusted humans, scientists, analysts, engineers. They did not spread panic. They verified. Humanity's strength was not speed, it was cooperation. As weeks passed, the group grew slowly, carefully. No messages were sent digitally. No meetings were scheduled officially. They spoke in fragments in person, always aware of eyes watching. Union officials sensed something. Security inspections increased. Random audits became frequent. One morning, Evan was questioned about unusual system access. "I follow task lists," he said calmly. "Nothing more." The answer was true and incomplete. Lura watched from across the room as the official studied Evan with cold interest. That night, Lura received a warning, a quiet one. Her access privileges were reduced. Her work routes were changed. Surveillance followed her more closely. The Union was suspicious. "You should stop," Evan whispered to her during a brief encounter. "They're watching you now." Lura shook her head. "Stopping now would confirm their fears." "And if they remove you?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Then you must continue." That frightened him more than anything she had said before. The pressure grew daily. Union leadership began discussing acceleration openly in restricted rooms. Lura overheard fragments that made her chest tighten. Human response is faster than expected. As a Velathi survivor, she told him about her people's fall, about how powerful allies had decided their existence was inconvenient, about how silence had been their final mistake. Evan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke quietly. "Then we won't repeat that mistake." He looked at her with fierce certainty. "We won't go quietly." That was the moment Lura fully believed in humanity. Together, they prepared the next step, not exposure, not confrontation, but readiness. If the Union moved, humanity would not be helpless. If the Union lied, humans would have proof. And if the Union tried to erase Earth quietly, it would not be quiet anymore. Lura returned to her cleaning duties the next morning, her posture calm, her expression neutral. But inside her, fear had transformed into resolve. She was no longer just watching history. She was shaping it. And the maid everyone ignored was now standing at the center of a choice that would decide the fate of an entire world. The change began quietly. No alarms sounded. No public announcements were made. Life on Earth continued as normal. People went to work, children went to school, cities stayed loud and bright. From the outside, nothing had changed, but beneath the surface, humanity was moving. Evan Carter and the small group he trusted worked with careful patience. They did not rush. They did not panic. They checked every detail twice, sometimes 3 times. Every piece of information had to be true before it was shared. Lura guided them without leading. She never said, "Do this." That surprised even Lura. Engineers began studying old systems, not to improve them, but to understand how they could be used differently. Scientists compared Union reports with Earth's own data and found gaps that raised serious questions. Diplomats noticed how promises were written without timelines. Humanity did not confront the Union. Not yet. Instead, they prepared. On the surface, Earth accepted every inspection and followed every rule. Union officials grew confident. They believed humans were still confused, still dependent, still small. That belief was their weakness. Lura watched Union meetings closely. She noticed a shift in tone. Officials spoke with less patience now. Their calm words carried frustration underneath. They are adapting, one delegate said during a private discussion. Yes, another replied, faster than projections. Trade restrictions were tightened. Research projects were delayed without explanation. The goal was clear: slow humanity down, but humans did not slow. They adjusted. When access was blocked, they built alternatives. When information was hidden, they searched older archives. When rules became unclear, they worked within them in creative ways. Lura felt something she had not felt since her childhood: pride. One night, Evan met with the group in an unused underground facility far from the embassy. It was old, built decades before first contact, and long forgotten by the Union. "We don't expose them yet," Evan said. "Not until we're ready." "And when is that?" a scientist asked. "When they move," Evan replied, "because they will." Lura stood quietly at the back, listening. She knew this moment mattered. Humans were choosing strategy over fear. That alone changed everything. Days later, the Union made its next move. A large-scale safety exercise was announced. Union fleets would reposition near Earth's orbital space. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, it was pressure. Humans noticed immediately. Earth's leaders asked questions. The answers were polite but empty. Lura heard Union commanders speak privately. "Positioning is complete." "Time is tightening," she said softly. Evan nodded. "Then so do we." Humanity responded, not with weapons but with unity. Governments that often argued began sharing information. Private companies cooperated with public research. Old rivalries were set aside. The Union had expected fear. They found focus instead. Earth's communication networks were strengthened and shielded. Power systems were secured. Backup plans were prepared quietly. None of it violated Union rules, but all of it reduced dependence. Lura helped where she could. She passed knowledge from her people, ancient strategies designed to survive stronger forces without open conflict. "Do not show strength too early," she told Evan. "Let them underestimate you." The Union continued watching. One official, a sharp-eyed observer named Talrex, began to suspect something. He noticed how humans responded calmly to pressure, how their systems failed less often instead of more. "They are preparing," Talrex said during a closed meeting. "Preparing for what?" another asked. Talrex hesitated. "I am not sure, that is the problem." Orders came down to increase surveillance. Lura felt eyes on her constantly now. Drones followed her routes. Her access was limited further. Her cleaning tasks were changed daily to confuse her movements. Still, she remained calm. Fear would reveal her. Instead, she trusted humans. One evening, Evan sent a single message through an agreed signal, an old maintenance light blinking twice. They met briefly near a supply corridor. "They're moving faster," Evan whispered. "We intercepted a model simulation." Lura's breath caught. "How soon?" "Years instead of decades," Evan said. "Maybe less." Lura closed her eyes for a moment, then she nodded. "Then you must be seen." Evan frowned. "Seen how?" "Not as weak," she replied, "as aware." The next step was dangerous. Humanity began asking questions publicly. Not accusations, not demands, just clear, calm requests for clarification. Why were certain systems restricted? Why were safety exercises needed near a peaceful world? Why were evaluation terms changing? The Union was not used to being questioned by a developing species. Responses became sharp. "Trust must be maintained," one official said coldly during a broadcast. "Trust requires honesty," a human diplomat replied calmly. Across the galaxy, others were watching. Some younger species noticed the exchange. Some older ones remembered similar moments from their past. The Union's image of calm authority began to crack. Lura saw the change in the halls. Voices grew tense. Movements became rushed. Control was slipping. Talrex confronted Lura one morning. "You have been near many unusual events," he said, his eyes fixed on her. "For a maid." Lura bowed her head slightly. "I clean where I am told." Talrex studied her for a long moment, then turned away, but the suspicion remained. That night, Union leadership made a critical mistake. They advanced their plan. A small incident occurred in orbit, a satellite malfunction, no casualties, but it was a test. Humanity responded immediately. Systems switched to backups without failure. Communication stayed strong. Evidence of interference was quietly recorded. The message was clear. Earth was no longer helpless. Lura watched the data streams and felt a deep, steady calm. This time, humanity would not be erased quietly. The Union had wanted control without conflict. They were about to face resistance without violence. As Lura returned to her duties, she passed human workers who nodded at her, not as a maid but as an ally. The future was still uncertain. Danger still loomed. But for the first time, the balance had shifted. Humanity was standing up, and the galaxy was beginning to notice. The Galactic Union Council chamber was built to impress. Its ceiling stretched high above, filled with soft moving lights that showed stars from across the galaxy. Tall seats curved around a central platform, where decisions affecting hundreds of worlds were made with calm voices and careful words. Today, those calm voices were strained. Earth's representatives stood at the platform, human leaders dressed simply compared to the elaborate forms around them. They did not look afraid. They looked focused. Lura stood far from the center, near the service wall, holding a cleaning tray she did not need. She was supposed to be invisible, but her heart beat steadily, strong and clear. This meeting was not routine. The Union had called it after Earth submitted a formal request for transparency. It was written politely, carefully, but its meaning was sharp. Humanity wanted answers. Counselor Vesh, one of the Union's senior voices, spoke first. Earth's concerns have been reviewed, Vesh said smoothly. The Union has always acted in your best interest. Evan Carter stood behind the human delegates, officially listed as a technical advisor. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture calm. Then clarity should not be difficult, a human diplomat replied. We ask only for full access to evaluation records concerning our planet. A soft murmur spread through the chamber. Several counselors exchanged looks. Those records are complex, Vesh said, and unnecessary for a developing world. Evan felt the moment tighten. This was the answer they expected. Unnecessary for control, the diplomat said calmly, but necessary for trust. Silence followed. Across the room, Lura watched Talrex closely. The sharp-eyed official's gaze moved between the humans and the counselors. He sensed danger now, not from weapons but from truth. Vesh lifted a hand. This discussion is becoming emotional. The Union suggests a delay. No, the human diplomat said gently. We suggest honesty. That word echoed louder than any shout. The Union had a choice. They chose denial. Counselor Vesh straightened. Earth is overreacting. There are no hostile plans. Any claims otherwise are misunderstandings. Evan felt the signal from the human delegates. It was time. He stepped forward. With respect, Evan said clearly, his voice carrying across the chamber, we have evidence. A ripple of surprise moved through the council. Unauthorized speech, Vesh snapped. Evan did not stop. He activated a secure projection. Data filled the air, timelines, simulations, carefully masked phrases translated into plain meaning. The evidence was clean, verified, and impossible to dismiss. Controlled incidents, accelerated timelines. Risk assessments that treated lives as numbers, gasps echoed. Some counselors looked away, others stared in shock. Vesh's voice hardened. This information is classified. It was hidden, Evan replied. There is a difference. The chamber buzzed with tension. Talrex stepped forward. Who assisted you? He demanded. The room went quiet. Lura felt every eye shift, searching. This was the moment she had prepared for. She stepped away from the wall. Her footsteps were soft, but in the silence they sounded loud. I did, she said. Dozens of heads turned. The maid stood at the center platform. Counselors stared in disbelief. You, Vesh said sharply. A service worker, Lura set her cleaning tray down gently. "I am Velathi," she said calmly, "one of the few remaining." The name stirred memory, an old one. A counselor whispered, "But the Velathi were lost." "They were erased," Lura corrected, quietly, carefully, politely. Her voice never rose, yet it filled the chamber. "I have listened to this council speak of protection while planning removal. I have seen evaluation words hide endings. I have watched humanity placed on the same path my people once walked." She looked directly at Vesh. "I will not watch it happen again." The Union tried to interrupt her, but something unexpected happened. Several counselors raised their hands. They wanted to hear her speak. Lura continued. "Humans are not perfect. They argue, they fail, they change their minds," she said. "But when faced with danger, they work together. They learn fast. They do not surrender quietly." She gestured toward the human delegation. "You saw weakness. You mistook patience for ignorance." Murmurs spread wider now, not of anger but doubt. Talrex spoke again, slower this time. "If this is true, why expose it now?" "Because secrecy only protects those in power," Lura said, "not peace." The chamber fell into heavy silence. Then something rare happened. A counselor from a younger species stood. "My people were once evaluated," they said quietly. "We survived only because the process stopped." Another rose. "So were ours," an older voice added. "We were not so lucky." The Union was fracturing. Vesh saw it and reacted sharply. "This council will not be manipulated by sentiment," but the control was already slipping. The humans did not cheer. They did not threaten. They simply stood their ground. Evan met Lura's eyes across the chamber. She gave a small nod. The council recessed for emergency discussion. Lura was escorted from the chamber, not arrested but watched closely. As she waited in a quiet holding area, she wondered if she would ever walk free again. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, the door opened. Talrex entered alone. "You have changed things," he said slowly. "Yes," Lura replied. "Some will call you a traitor," he said. She looked at him calmly. "Some already called my people extinct." Talrex studied her, then turned away. "The council has voted." The decision was announced publicly. All evaluation plans for Earth were suspended. An independent review would begin. Union authority over Earth would be reduced. Humanity would be recognized as a self-determining member world in transition. It was not full victory, but it was survival. When the news reached Earth, there was no celebration in the streets, just relief, quiet pride. A deep breath held for years finally released. Lura was cleared of wrongdoing. Humans requested her protection immediately. The Union agreed. She returned to Earth aboard a human ship, standing beside Evan as the planet grew large and blue beneath them. "You could have stayed hidden," Evan said quietly. Lura looked at the world below. "So could you." They shared a small smile. The galaxy had not changed overnight, but something important had shifted. A Maid had spoken. Humanity had stood. And for the first time in a long while, the future felt open instead of planned. One part remained. What came next would decide not just Earth's place, but the kind of galaxy that would exist. And Lura was ready. The days after the council decision were quiet but heavy with meaning. Across Earth, people continued their lives as always. Trains ran, markets opened, children laughed. From the outside, nothing looked different. But for the first time since first contact, humanity was no longer being silently measured by others. They were being respected. High above Earth, Union fleets slowly moved away from close orbit. Official statements called it routine repositioning, but humans understood the truth. Pressure had been removed. Lura stood inside the observation room of a human research station, looking down at the blue curve of Earth. Sunlight touched the oceans, making them shine. She had seen many worlds in her lifetime. None felt like this one. "You're quiet," Evan said gently, standing beside her. "I am listening," Lura replied. "To what?" he asked. She smiled slightly. "To a future that is not written yet." After the council, many choices had been offered to her. The Galactic Union suggested relocation to a neutral world. Protection units were assigned. Advisors recommended she disappear into safety. Humans offered something different, a place, not as a symbol, not as a tool, but as a person. Lura chose Earth. News of the alien Maid spread slowly, carefully. Humans did not turn her into a legend overnight. They spoke of her with respect, but also with understanding. She was invited to speak to leaders, to scientists, to students. She did not speak often. When she did, her words were simple: power should be questioned. Instead, Earth focused inward on growth, learning, and connection. That confused the galaxy. Evan continued his work, now officially assigned to planetary systems independence. He worked harder than ever, but with less fear. When systems failed, humans fixed them. When challenges appeared, they faced them together. Lura became an advisor, though she disliked the title. She preferred to walk through human spaces, talk to ordinary people, observe their lives. One afternoon, she visited a small school. Children stared at her blue skin and large eyes, then asked questions with honest curiosity. "Are you really from space?" one child asked. "Yes," Lura said. "Were you scared?" another asked. Lura thought for a moment. "Yes, but courage is not the absence of fear." The children nodded, satisfied. As months passed, the independent review within the Union revealed more hidden plans, not just for Earth, but for other young worlds. The Council was forced to change. Old systems broke. New voices rose. Some credited humanity, some credited Lura. She credited choice. Talrex contacted her once through an official channel. "You disrupted centuries of procedure," he said. "Procedures that erased lives," she replied calmly. There was a pause. "Perhaps," Talrex said slowly, "the Union needs to remember why it was formed." "Perhaps," Lura agreed. Earth's status shifted from protected to partner. Not equal yet, but no longer beneath. It was a beginning. On a quiet evening, Lura returned to the Galactic Union Embassy on Earth. The same halls, the same polished floors. She was no longer required to clean them. Still, she walked through slowly, touching the walls she once wiped in silence. She remembered the days of watching, listening, choosing. In one empty corridor, she stopped. A human maintenance worker passed by and smiled. "Good evening." "Good evening," Lura replied, simple, equal. Later, she stood on a balcony overlooking the city with Evan. "Do you ever regret it?" Evan asked. Stepping forward like that, Lura watched the city lights flicker. "My people were lost because we waited." "Regret comes from silence, not action." Evan nodded. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I will stay," Lura said, "and help build something better." Earth became a meeting place, not of power, but of dialogue. Younger species began sending observers, curious about humans who had stood against quiet destruction without violence. They studied Earth's culture, its disagreements, its creativity. Many left inspired. The phrase Earth model began appearing in Union discussions. Not as a rule, but as an idea: transparency, cooperation, shared risk. Humanity had changed the conversation. Years later, a memorial was built, not for a battle, but for a decision. It honored worlds lost to silence. At its center stood a simple plaque: "The future belongs to those who choose to speak." Lura visited it once, standing quietly among humans and aliens alike. No one bowed to her. No one ignored her. She was exactly where she belonged. As humanity reached further into the stars, they carried a lesson learned early, taught by an unlikely friend. Greatness does not always arrive with power. Sometimes it arrives with a quiet voice, a brave choice, and the courage to stand when no one expects you to. And somewhere in the galaxy, stories began to spread. Not about fleets or empires, but about a small alien maid who saved humanity by believing it was worth saving.